The air hung heavy over Prakanong. It was thick with humidity and the scent of jasmine. The fragrance was almost intoxicating, wrapping around the senses like a warm, invisible blanket. But something else lingered beneath. It was a feeling, a sense of unease that crept into the bones of anyone who stayed too long. A chill. An unseen presence watched from the shadows. It was as if the very air was alive, whispering secrets that no one dared to speak aloud. The villagers felt it. They always did. Their eyes would dart nervously and their conversations would hush whenever the topic came up, especially when the sun began to set. The twilight brought with it a sense of foreboding, a reminder that nightfall was near. Prakanong was a peaceful place. Lush greenery lined the canals. The vibrant foliage seemed to pulse with life, a stark contrast to the underlying tension. Small wooden houses sat on stilts above the water. These homes, though simple, were filled with warmth and history. People smiled and greeted each other warmly. Their interactions were genuine, yet there was always a hint of something unspoken. But their smiles never quite reached their eyes. Not after dark. The night brought with it a different kind of reality, for they knew what haunted their home, the spirit of Mae Nak. Her presence was a constant reminder of the village's haunted past. The story had been passed down for generations, a tale of love, loss, and a mother's undying devotion. It was a story that shaped the very fabric of their lives. It was a warning, whispered from parent to child, a cautionary tale that served as a guide for how to live in harmony with the unseen world. Never disrespect the spirits, especially not Mae Nak. Her story was a testament to the power of love and the consequences of ignoring the spiritual realm. Mak was a kind young man. He had a gentle heart and a quick smile. Nak was beautiful. Her laugh was like the tinkling of wind chimes. They fell deeply in love. Their happiness was a beacon of light in Prakanong. Their families blessed their union. Soon, they were married. The small wooden house on the canal was filled with laughter. Mak worked hard as a fisherman. Nak tended to their home. They were content. Their life together was simple, but it was theirs. One day, everything changed forever. War had come to Siam, bringing chaos. The king called upon all able-bodied men to fight bravely. Mak was heartbroken. He didn't want to leave Nak behind, especially not now. She was expecting their first child soon, but duty called. With tears in their eyes, Mak promised Nak he would return. He vowed to hold their child in his arms very soon. Nak stood on the dock. She watched as Mak's boat disappeared into the distance. Section 4, A Birth and a Burial. Loneliness settled over Nak. The days grew long and the nights even longer. She rubbed her belly, feeling the life growing inside her. She spoke to her unborn child, her voice filled with hope and dreams for the future. She told stories of Mak, her husband who was away at war. She spoke of his bravery, his kindness, and how much he would love their child. These stories were filled with love and longing, painting a picture of a happy family that Nak yearned for. Then, one stormy night it happened. Nak went into labor. The storm raged outside, thunder echoing her cries of pain. The storm mirrored the turmoil in her body, each contraction a wave crashing against her. The villagers rushed to help, their faces etched with concern and urgency. But it was too late. Despite their best efforts, Nak's life slipped away. Nak died, bringing a healthy baby boy into the world. Grief filled the village, the joy of new life overshadowed by the loss of another. They buried Nak in the temple graveyard, a place of peace and reverence. They placed her baby beside her, a symbol of the bond that even death could not break. They whispered prayers for her soul, hoping she would find peace in the afterlife. But something wasn't right. The air grew colder, a chill that seeped into their bones. The shadows seemed to deepen, stretching longer and darker. And the whispers began, soft at first, then growing louder, filling the night with an eerie presence. Section 5. The whispers begin. Strange things started happening in Prakanong. Objects moved on their own. Voices whispered in the night. People claimed to see a young woman in a white dress. She wandered the village. She carried a baby in her arms. Fear spread through the village. They knew the stories. They knew who it was. Mae Nak had returned. She was restless. She yearned for her husband. She was trapped between two worlds, unable to move on. Section 6. Return of the Warrior. Months later, Mac returned from war. He was filled with joy. He couldn't wait to see his wife and child. He rushed home. He pushed open the door to their little house. There they were, Nak and their baby. Mac was overjoyed. He embraced Nak. He lifted their son into his arms. He told them stories of the war. He spoke of his longing to be home. Nak listened. Her eyes shone with an unnatural light. The baby never cried. Section 7. Reunited forevermore. One serene evening, Mac was playing joyfully with his son in their traditional Thai home. The air was filled with laughter and the warmth of familial love. However, amidst this seemingly perfect moment, Mac noticed something strange. As the evening light cast long shadows across the floor, Mac saw Nak's shadow stretching unnaturally. It was elongated, almost as if it had a life of its own. Her arm, too, seemed to stretch out in an eerie manner. The shadow reached for a lime that had fallen from the table. Her fingers elongated, becoming unnaturally long and thin, as if they were no longer bound by the constraints of human form. Mac's heart raced. The lime slipped from his grasp and he gasped in shock. In that moment, the horrifying truth dawned on him. His beloved Nak was no longer among the living. She was a ghost, a spirit lingering in their home. Terror filled Mac's heart. The realization that he had been living with a ghost all this time was overwhelming. His mind raced with fear and confusion, but as quickly as the terror had come, it was replaced by a profound wave of sadness. Despite the fear, Mac's love for Nak remained undiminished. He loved her deeply, even in death. The villagers, noticing Mac's terror and distress, rushed to the house. They had long suspected the truth about Nak and were prepared to intervene. With heavy hearts, they convinced Mae Nak to return to the afterlife. They knew it was the only way for both her and Mac to find peace. The villagers promised to care for her son, ensuring that he would be loved and looked after. They vowed to protect him as if he were their own. They also vowed to keep Mae Nak's memory alive. Through rituals and stories, they would honor her spirit and the love she had for her family. With a final, sorrowful look at Mac, Mae Nak began to fade away. Her form grew fainter until she disappeared completely, leaving behind only memories and the faint scent of jasmine. The scent of jasmine lingered in the air, a poignant reminder of her presence. Mac was heartbroken, but he took solace in knowing that Nak's spirit was finally at peace. The village returned to a state of tranquility. Nak's spirit, now at peace, no longer haunted their home. The serene atmosphere was a testament to the enduring power of love and the peace that comes with letting go. Mac dedicated himself to raising their son in Paranormal. He poured all his love and energy into ensuring that their child grew up happy and healthy. He often shared stories of Nak with their son, recounting the love they had shared and the sacrifices she had made. Through these stories he kept her memory alive. The villagers, too, played their part in keeping the legend of Mae Nak alive. They gathered to share tales of her love and devotion, ensuring that her story would be passed down through generations. Mae Nak's story became a symbol of enduring love, a chilling reminder of the lengths one would go for those they cherish. It was a tale that spoke to the heart, resonating with anyone who had ever loved and lost. And so the legend of Mae Nak lived on, a haunting reminder of the sorrow that comes with loss and the unbreakable bond of love that transcends even death. Mac's heart soared. He was home. The familiar sights and sounds of his village filled him with a sense of peace he hadn't felt in months. The war had taken its toll on him, both physically and emotionally, but now, standing on the soil of his homeland, he felt a wave of relief wash over him. After months away fighting in the war, he was finally back in the village he knew. The village was just as he remembered it, with its narrow, winding paths and the scent of fresh bread wafting through the air. He could see the familiar faces of his neighbors who greeted him with warm smiles and nods of recognition. It was as if time had stood still in this little corner of the world. He rushed to his hut. His heart pounded with anticipation as he neared the small wooden structure that he had called home for so many years. Each step brought him closer to the life he had missed so dearly, the memories of laughter, love, and warmth flooded his mind, making his pace quicken. There, waiting with open arms, was his beloved Nak. Her eyes sparkled with tears of joy, and her smile was as radiant as the sun. She had been his rock, his anchor through the stormy seas of life. Seeing her standing there, waiting for him, filled his heart with an overwhelming sense of gratitude and love. She was even more beautiful than he remembered. Her beauty was not just in her appearance, but in the strength and resilience she had shown during his absence. She had managed to keep their home and their lives together, despite the challenges she faced alone. Her inner strength shone through, making her even more captivating. In her arms, she held their newborn son. The sight of the tiny, fragile life cradled in her arms brought tears to Mac's eyes. He had missed the birth of his child, a moment he had longed to witness, but now, seeing his son for the first time, he felt an indescribable bond form instantly. Mac felt a rush of love for both of them. He was home. The embrace of his family was the most comforting thing he had ever felt. It was as if all the pain and hardship of the past months melted away in that single moment of reunion. He held them close, vowing never to let go. He was finally a father. Life was perfect. The weight of responsibility settled on his shoulders, but it was a burden he welcomed with open arms. He looked at his son, marveling at the tiny fingers and toes, the soft cooing sounds and the innocent eyes that stared back at him. This was his legacy, his future. Nak was everything to him. She had been his strength, his hope, and his reason to keep fighting. Her unwavering support and love had been his guiding light through the darkest times. He knew that without her, he would not have made it through the war. She was his everything, and he was determined to show her just how much she meant to him. The hut was just as he left it. The familiar surroundings brought a sense of comfort and stability. The simple wooden furniture, the woven mats on the floor, and the small hearth in the corner were all as he remembered. It was a humble home, but it was filled with love and memories. Nak had kept it clean and bright. Despite the hardships she faced, she had managed to maintain their home with care and dedication. The hut was a reflection of her love and commitment to their family. It was a sanctuary, a place where they could find peace and solace. She was a natural mother doting on their son. Her gentle touch and soothing voice calmed the baby, and Mac could see the deep bond that had already formed between them. She had taken on the role of a mother with grace and ease, and it filled him with pride to see her in this new light. Mac felt a pang of guilt for being gone so long. The war had kept him away from the most important moments of their lives. He had missed the birth of his son, the first smiles, the sleepless nights, and the tender moments that defined the early days of parenthood. The guilt weighed heavily on his heart. He vowed to make it up to her. He promised himself that he would be the husband and father they deserved. He would be there for every milestone, every laugh, and every tear. He would make up for the lost time and create new memories that would last a lifetime. He would spend his days making up for lost time. He would be present, fully engaged in their lives. He would play with his son, teach him and watch him grow. He would support Nak in every way possible, sharing the responsibilities and joys of parenthood. He would shower Nak and their son with love. Every day would be a testament to his devotion and gratitude. He would cherish the moments of laughter, the quiet evenings, and the simple joys of family life. He would never take them for granted again. Mac was home, and he was determined to savor every moment. The war had taught him the value of life, love, and family. He knew that every second was precious, and he was committed to making the most of it. He would live each day with purpose and joy, surrounded by the people he loved most. The villagers were happy to see Mac. He had been away for a long time, and his return was a cause for celebration. The air was filled with the scent of freshly baked bread and the sound of children laughing. It was a scene of pure joy, or so it seemed. But their smiles seemed strained. Their greetings were hesitant. It was as if they were forcing themselves to be happy, masking an underlying tension that Mac couldn't quite put his finger on. When he told them how wonderful Nak was, how happy they were, their faces tightened. Something wasn't right. The joy he expected to see in their eyes was replaced by a shadow of concern, a flicker of unease that made his heart sink. At first, Mac dismissed their odd behavior. He chalked it up to the stress of his long absence. Surely they were just adjusting to his return. He tried to ignore the gnawing feeling in his gut, the sense that something was terribly wrong. They were just glad to have him home, he thought. But the whispers started, soft, almost inaudible murmurs that seemed to follow him wherever he went. He could feel their eyes on him, could sense their conversations halting as he approached. Quick, furtive conversations stopped whenever he came near. People avoided his eyes. It was as if they were hiding something they didn't want him to know. The village that once felt like home now felt alien, filled with secrets and shadows. Fear lingered in the air. It was palpable, a heavy presence that seemed to weigh down on everyone. The children no longer played freely. The laughter had died down, replaced by a tense silence that was almost suffocating. One old woman finally approached him. Her steps were slow, her eyes filled with a mix of sorrow and apprehension. She seemed to carry the weight of the world on her frail shoulders. Her voice trembled as she spoke. It was as if she was afraid of the words she was about to utter, as if they held a power that could shatter the fragile peace of the village. "Mac," she said, "you were gone a long time." Her words hung in the air, heavy with unspoken meaning. It was a simple statement, but the way she said it made Mac's heart race. We thought you were dead." Mac frowned. The words hit him like a physical blow. Dead? How could they think that? He'd been sending letters, keeping in touch, or so he thought. "But Nak sent me letters," he said. His voice was filled with confusion and a growing sense of dread. He pulled out the letters, the ones that had kept him going during his time away. They were real, weren't they? The old woman's eyes widened. "Nak is gone, Mac. She died in childbirth." Her words were like a dagger to his heart. The world seemed to tilt. The ground beneath his feet felt unsteady. The blood drained from Mac's face. He felt cold, a chill that seeped into his bones. How could this be? He had just seen her, just held her. The letters, the memories, they couldn't be lies. He stumbled back, his mind reeling, the world around him blurred. The faces of the villagers became indistinct shapes. He felt like he was in a nightmare, one he couldn't wake up from. Nak dead? Impossible. His voice was a whisper filled with disbelief. He couldn't accept it, couldn't wrap his mind around the idea that she was gone. He had just seen her, and the memory was vivid, as if it had happened just moments ago. Her smile, her touch, they were real, weren't they? He had just held her, the warmth of her embrace, the softness of her voice, they were etched into his mind. How could she be gone? He looked from the old woman to the other villagers, their faces etched with fear and pity. They knew something he didn't, something that had changed everything. The village was no longer the place he had left. It was filled with whispers in the shadows, secrets that threatened to unravel his world. Panic welled up inside Mac. It was a feeling he hadn't experienced in years, not since the days of his youth when the world seemed full of unknown dangers lurking in every shadow. But this was different. This was a fear that gripped his very soul, a terror that made his heart race and his breath come in short, ragged gasps. He stumbled back towards his hut, his heart pounding in his chest. Each step felt like a struggle, as if the very ground beneath him was trying to pull him down, to keep him from reaching his destination. The path that had always been so familiar now seemed twisted and foreign, every tree and rock a potential threat. He burst through the door, desperate to see Nak, to hold her, to prove the villagers wrong. The rumors had spread like wildfire, whispers of unnatural occurrences, of things that defied explanation. Mac had dismissed them as mere superstition, the product of overactive imaginations. But now, with his heart in his throat, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly, terribly wrong. She was there, humming softly to their son. The sight of her, so serene and beautiful, brought a momentary sense of relief. Her voice, gentle and melodic, seemed to chase away the shadows that had been closing in on him. For a brief moment he allowed himself to believe that everything was all right, that the fears that had driven him here were unfounded. She looked up, a smile gracing her lips. It was a smile that had always brought him comfort, a smile that spoke of love and warmth and home. But today there was something different about it, something that made his skin crawl. It was as if the smile didn't quite reach her eyes, as if it was a mask hiding something far more sinister. "Mac," she said, "what's wrong? You look pale." Her voice was filled with concern, but there was an edge to it, a note of something that he couldn't quite place. It was as if she was trying to hide something, as if she knew more than she was letting on. The words hung in the air, heavy with unspoken fears and doubts. But Mac's blood ran cold. The words that had been swirling in his mind, the warnings of the villagers, the strange occurrences, all came crashing down on him. He felt a chill run down his spine, a cold that seemed to seep into his very bones. It was a feeling of dread, of impending doom, and he couldn't shake it. He stared at Nak, his eyes wide with horror. The woman before him, the woman he had loved and cherished, seemed to be slipping away, replaced by something he couldn't understand. It was as if a veil had been lifted, revealing a truth that he had been too blind to see. The realization hit him like a physical blow, leaving him reeling. He had been so blinded by joy that he hadn't noticed before. The happiness that had filled their home, the laughter and love, had been a smokescreen, hiding the darkness that lurked beneath. He had ignored the signs, dismissed the warnings, all in the name of love, and now he was paying the price. He had ignored the villagers' warnings. They had spoken of strange happenings, of things that defied explanation, but he had laughed it off, confident in his love for Nak, certain that nothing could come between them. He had been a fool, blinded by his own arrogance, and now he was faced with the consequences of his actions. Now the truth was impossible to deny. The evidence was right before his eyes, undeniable and terrifying. He felt a sense of helplessness, a realization that he was powerless to change what was happening. The world he had known, the life he had built, was crumbling around him, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. As Nak reached out to him, her arms stretched across the room, impossibly long, impossibly thin. It was a sight that defied logic, a grotesque distortion of reality. He watched in horror as her arm extended, reaching for him with a cold, clammy hand. It was a nightmare come to life, a vision of terror that he couldn't escape. Her hand, cold and clammy, brushed his cheek. The touch sent a shiver down his spine, a feeling of revulsion that made him want to pull away. But he was frozen, unable to move, trapped in the grip of his own fear. The hand that had once brought him comfort now felt like a death sentence, a reminder of the horror that had taken over his life. He recoiled from her touch. The movement was instinctive, a reaction to the overwhelming sense of dread that filled him. He stumbled back, his heart racing, his mind a whirlwind of fear and confusion. The woman before him, the woman he had loved, was gone, replaced by something he couldn't understand, something that filled him with terror. The warmth of her smile felt like an icy blast. It was a smile that had once brought him joy, but now it was a twisted mockery, a reminder of the love that had been lost. The warmth that had once filled their home was gone, replaced by a cold, unfeeling presence that seemed to suck the life out of everything it touched. His Nak, his beautiful wife, was gone. The realization hit him with a force that left him breathless, a sense of loss that was almost too much to bear. The woman he had loved, the woman he had built a life with, was gone, replaced by something unnatural, something terrifying. The life they had shared, the dreams they had built, were shattered, leaving him with nothing but a sense of overwhelming sorrow. Standing before him was something else, something unnatural, something terrifying. It was a vision of horror, a nightmare come to life. The figure that had once been his wife was now a grotesque distortion, a reminder of the darkness that had taken over their lives. He felt a sense of helplessness, a realization that there was nothing he could do to change what had happened. The world he had known was gone, replaced by a nightmare that he couldn't escape. Mac didn't hesitate. He turned and fled, his mind screaming for him to escape. He could hear Nak's voice behind him, filled with confusion, then anger. "Mac, where are you going? Don't you want to see our son?" But Mac didn't stop. He ran through the village, his breath coming in ragged gasps. The villagers scattered before him, their faces pale with terror. He didn't blame them. He couldn't blame them. He knew where he had to go. The temple, it was the only place he might be safe. He could hear Nak's enraged cries getting closer, her voice echoing with unnatural power. "Mac, come back! Don't leave me!" Her pleas were filled with rage and despair. But Mac didn't dare look back. He knew if he stopped, if he gave in to her pleas, he would be lost. He had to reach the temple. He had to escape.